This video started with a simple question from our friend here. Why am I running all over the place, torturing myself endlessly and constantly chasing targets when I don't even know what I want? And the answer is simple. The problem is our needs. Let's start with the definition. And yes, definitions are important because if a need can't be defined, how can it be something that must be satisfied? You're pretty much setting yourself up for failure by chasing a moving target. Of course, you'll never feel like you achieved what you wanted because you never decided what that was to begin with. So let's be precise. Most people would agree that needs are things that are required. They are the things that are necessary for our survival, like food, shelter, and GTA 6. Wants, on the other hand, are things that improve our happiness. They are optional, like vacations, parties, and the GTA 6 Collector's Edition. But there are two problems with this. First, the fundamental problem. Do we need to live or do we want to live? Well, we clearly don't need to live, right? At the end of the day, what do our lives really provide? And while there's never been a cooler time to be filled with crippling existential dread, shouldn't life be something we want to do for ourselves? But if life itself is a want, how can anything else in our life be a need? It just doesn't make any sense, does it? When living is something you choose to do for yourself, everything else becomes choices too. Here's an interesting question to ponder. Do we need happiness or do we want happiness? Think about this. If the way we interact with the world is through our consciousness, and our consciousness doesn't feel like doing it anymore, does the rest of the world still matter? The will to live is a precursor to life itself. It's often said that you can live 8 minutes without air, but only a second without hope. In fact, taken to its extreme, one could even make the argument that nothing is necessary, and hence nothing is a need. But there's another, more practical reason why this definition fails. And it's quite simple. If we really required everything we claimed to need, most people would not survive without it. And yet they do. So what do we really need to survive? The list is actually absurdly small. Do we need things because we require them for life? Or because we require them to live a good life? But who even decides what that means? Maybe our notion of needs and wants is just a spectrum of how important something is. And somewhere, maybe as a matter of convenience, we just drew an arbitrary line. At this point, you may be asking, who cares? And I agree, I haven't quite addressed the core problem just yet. In fact, some of you might also be thinking that this worldview of having no needs simply isn't a useful one. But I disagree. Yes, we've been a bit philosophical so far. And yes, being pretentious is one of the reasons I like to do this. But it's not the only one. Thinking of your needs as a type of want is actually very practical too, for 4 reasons. Let's start with the least obvious one. It improves our decision making. This might be a bit counterintuitive, so let's go back to our spectrum. What is the metric that we use to decide if something is a need? Is it its importance to our happiness? Well, that makes sense at first glance, but don't we have a lot of needs that don't give us any happiness at all? In fact, for most people, I would argue it's probably closer to this. Needs are just the wants we question less. This is incredibly powerful, by the way. Consider this. You're on bed on a Monday morning and you think, I hate Mondays, but I need to wake up. And then guess what? You wake up. Every week, every year. Easy. As opposed to the philosopher who sits and thinks, well, do I want to wake up? What happens if I miss my work? Do I want to work? Will I ever retire? Why am I happier to be asleep than I am to be alive? Yeah, not exactly the most useful thought. Needs, on the other hand, are useful. We use our needs as a psychological crutch to prevent making active decisions most of the time. It gives our life structure and helps us make good decisions on autopilot. They reduce the cognitive load of our choices since we can avoid actually questioning them. And yes, we love being told what to do. But here's the thing. Sure, some of our needs might legitimately improve our lives, but many of them are just inherited from the environment we grew in. In fact, most things we call needs probably aren't even our own. When we think of things as wants, we retain the flexibility and the freedom to choose. This forces us to ask the ultimate question, why do I want this? Which in turn enables critical thinking and the ability to make informed choices. But the moment we think of something as a need, it feels like we have no choice at all. So yeah, while it's okay to run life on autopilot, let's ask ourselves at least once a year, Do I want the things I'm struggling for? This in turn leads to better, more intentional decisions. Let's see some examples. Say your partner gives you a million reasons to leave, but you stick by them anyway because you just have to make things work. Or when you have everything you could have ever wanted as a kid, but you still feel like you have to achieve something bigger. Or maybe, like me, you were an overachiever in school and now you have a crippling need for validation all the time. And like me, this subconsciously affects everything you do. Why? Thinking of these things as wants actually adds a lot of healthy perspective, because it's only when you acknowledge something as optional do you give yourself the space to decide if it's genuinely for you. And who knows, maybe one Monday morning as your alarm rings, you'll think to yourself, ugh, I hate Mondays, but I need to wake up. And then you'll realize, wait a damn minute, I already have everything I could have wanted. And then guess what? Yeah, that's right, it was just a dream and now you wake up for real. Which brings us to the second reason to think of things as wants. It's liberating. Life gets a lot more peaceful when you realize a fundamental truth. That the rock you live on doesn't care for your petty concerns, and that if what you do doesn't actually matter, how can it be necessary?
Hey, you there! You young ones have got it all wrong these days. Life ain't something you can do as you please. You think I like my life? But I still gotta do it for me kids.
Well, here's the third reason why thinking of things as wants is useful. It gives us perspective on our motivation. Let's go back to Greg here. Do you need to live your shitty life because someone forced you to? Or do you want to do it because you want your kids to be happy? But why do you want your kids to be happy? It's because you care for them, right? Then why is that missing from your perspective? So you can either tell yourself that your life isn't much but you do it for your kids, or you can tell yourself the exact same thing framed differently, that your kids make your life worth living. When you love someone or something, life isn't just something you do for them. They are a part of your life, and hence a part of your choices. Sometimes in your lowest moments, these choices feel like sacrifices that were forced on us, and we lash out on the people we love. This is so stupid, because what were those choices for in the first place? Consciously thinking of our actions as things we want to do helps us remember why we do them. Which brings us to the final benefit of thinking of things as wants and not needs. It allows us to form healthier attitudes towards failure. We retain the motivation to try again and the flexibility to pivot if things aren't working out. Take me, for example, and my fear of failing. Does this really help me? Or am I just finding reasons to beat myself up? Failing to do a task isn't the same thing as being a failure, especially when you realize that the task itself was optional to begin with. So let's stop chasing for a day. Take a break and list the things we think we need. And let's all do something we haven't done for a while. Let's question them. So sure, we need to eat, we need to breathe, we need to live. But also, we need a 6-figure salary, a nice car, a promotion, a house. We need a steady job, but also a business. We need a degree, and we hate every second of it. We need to make our parents proud, but we also need our own path. We need to eat healthy, but we got to enjoy the small things in life. We need to save money, but we have to see the world. We need to exercise, we need to rest, we need to love. And it's hell when we get there, but also independence, don't forget that of course. So many things, but ask yourself, how much of this is really you? It's only when you realize that you have no obligations really to anyone but yourself that you can start to figure out what you actually want. Because maybe the journey isn't about becoming something. It's about unbecoming everything that isn't really you. Besides, who even makes the rules anyway? The sun won't check your resume before it rises. The sky won't care if you're behind schedule. Time doesn't pause to wait for your approval, and the waves never ask if you're doing enough. Because no matter what happens, tomorrow will still come. And the birds will still sing their songs for you. And maybe you'll choose to ignore them regardless, because you want to fight your own battles, and that's okay. It's your want. And it's okay to fail, to try again, or to give up. You never needed to do it anyway.